Managing contractors on investor grade rehabs is not like you've been told. You see, there are different types of construction. There is high end renovations, new building, there's commercial work, and it seems that everybody wants to group all of these up as it's under one umbrella that is construction. Whereas I think that they're all really different industries. The types of people that you hire and the way that you manage a project that is for us investors, the investor grade rehab, is so totally different of an industry as a high end renovation. The company itself needs different skills to deal with customers, and new building is just a whole systematic approach that is far different. And I know because I, as a contractor, have done all of these different types. I've also tried to be an investor in different types, and it's all different. That's the point. And so there's a different way to manage these guys. And what I'm talking about is investor grade rehabs, because that is what we focus on. And those are the types of contractors that I focus on working with. And so we've talked about how to recruit those guys. Now I'm going to talk about how to manage those guys. I've gone through a lot of different reinventions of myself and my program through the years of being a real estate investor. And at one time, I remember that I would walk into my office every day and jokingly say that, man, I hope it's not another 10K day, which basically meant I hope that the bad news that I get today does not cost me $10,000. And that, I guess, I thought was just kind of part of doing business. And I would even say things to the tune of, that's kind of what it's like when you grow your organization, is that all the news that gets to you is the bad news that hasn't been filtered through other people in the hierarchy. And I guess to some extent that is true, but the types of bad news I was getting was ridiculous. And what it basically came down to was that I just hadn't had the right people on those job sites. And anyway, what it ultimately did was it really turned me mean and callous. And I came up with these programs to really hold people to strong accountability, with the fairness spectrum being very heavily weighted to my side, which over time that has changed, which we'll get to. But it did start with, this was the beginning of what I call the Larossa system to managing investor grade rehabs. And so this is where I put together the 6 phases and the blocks inside of those phases and the jobs menu. And I would build scopes of work based upon that. I would go out and I would give them to contractors to bid, and I would get them signed up to go do certain jobs of a project, or maybe a full project. And I would spend all my time going to these job sites to make sure that everything that we had set in expectations was being done. I would, for lack of better words, micromanage the crap out of it. And I would certainly get results, but I wasn't building any relationships by doing this. I was just burning through contractors. And really, that's not the way to do things. That'll get you some results in the short term, but it is not going to build you an organization that is repeatable. Basically, the only way that works for you is if you keep your foot on the gas. However, eventually you will run out of contractors. And so just think about the way that you go about finding a contractor. You read reviews, you might ask around to see if people have worked with this person before. Well, contractors kind of do the same thing with you. If you have a reputation for taking advantage of situations, they won't want to come work with you. And truly, the types of jobs that we do are on the low end of the spectrum for a normal contractor, meaning they don't really want to do that. So you're already starting with strikes against you. And so I really have adopted a strategy of how do I, yes, set expectations and yes, hold accountability, but do all of this while building relationship capital. So that way I can really work with one contractor and build relationship capital as I'm working with them, and we start to learn each other and how we work well together, what I expect on most projects, how they work, and then we progressively get better at working together. And since we're also building relationship capital and trust as we're doing those things, it really makes me be able to put way less bandwidth into that one contractor. And then I can go find another one that I build the same thing with. And that's really how you ultimately put your organization on cruise control. When you can go to a contractor who you already know and show them the scope of work that you have made, and they know what to do, they know what you expect, they understand your vision, and then you can trust them to go do that thing. You basically buy back all of your bandwidth, and everybody's happy. The contractor's happy because they get to just go to a job site, do their thing. Nobody's going to bother them. They just get to work, and that's why they got in the business, to do what they like to do, which is work with their hands. And they know that they can trust you to pay them promptly when they're done. And yeah, it makes it better for everybody. Obviously, for you, you can build a business around that. But I do believe that this is the key to a successful real estate investment organization. That, of course, you have your different controls of real estate, which is 1, the acquisition, 2, the strategy, 3, the work, 4, the market. But this is the work, which is the defense, making sure that your strategy comes to fruition. Well, when you use the 10K a day method of my past, you spend a lot of your bandwidth on the work. Whereas if you do what we're about to talk about in this podcast, you will be able to buy back your bandwidth from the work and put it to where it should be, which is the acquisition, the deal, and the strategy. The first thing that you need to do is build a smart scope of work. So this is part of step 2 there, the strategy, is building a smart scope of work. And when I first started out, I thought that the contractor would do this. And I can still remember standing in a kitchen with the first contractor that screwed me over in my life. And I remember this was right after I came out of the corporate world. And so, I kind of thought he was the expert in that category. Therefore, I would go talk to him, build a relationship, and then I would, let him do what he knew how to do. And so fast forward to when the project was done, and it was nothing like I had envisioned. And it turns out the things that he did, I know now, were the things that were the easiest to make him the most money, not the things that were the best for the project. And that is, I guess, not then is when I realized this. It was way later that I realized all of this. But the truth of it is that he just didn't know. I mean, he doesn't know what things I want and do not want to maximize the profit of an investment. How could he? It took me a decade to figure it out. But that's what we're talking about with building a smart scope of work, is deciding what you need to do to maximize profit, not what you want to do, not what you think you would do on your own house. If you ever catch yourself thinking that way, that, well, this is what I would want on my own house. Stop. That's not what we're here to do. And I'm not talking about cutting corners. I'm not talking about giving somebody a crappy house with things that are going to go wrong. What I'm talking about is understanding where that house sits in a neighborhood and what class of neighborhood that is, and what are the finishes that maximize the market price in that neighborhood. And that is what you do on that project. Not more, because more doesn't bring you any extra money. And in fact, I usually don't get quite there, because I think that, 80-20 rule is the 80% gets you to where you need to be. And then that last 20% costs you most of the money. And so I kind of just avoid that and figure in that if all the houses are selling for 300 in that neighborhood, I'm probably not going to get that. I'm going to get a little bit less, but I'm also going to put in way less money than everybody else put in to get to that 300. And that is what I mean by a smart scope of work. Also, with a smart scope of work, I mean knowing that if you replace that trim, it's going to make the cabinets look bad. And so I'm not going to replace the trim, because it's only going to open up a can of worms that is seemingly never ending, to where I end up gutting the whole thing and redoing it anyway. So it's about being smart about what to do and what not to do. Just to reinforce this idea, that does not mean cutting corners. That does not mean skimping on safety and liability types of things. It means being smart about maximizing the profit on a project. What that means is that you cannot expect a contractor to have this vision for you. You will be adapting and evolving the vision you have for what maximizes the profit of an investment throughout your whole career. So how could you expect the contractor to have that vision? So you need to build the smart scope of work. That does not mean that the contractor won't help you to mold that smart scope of work. They might tell you, hey, you can't actually do that. It's going to cost more money than you think, or this won't fit code. If you do this, you're going to also have to do this, because it's going to mess up your house in whatever way. That is how you would lean on the professional, not by building the general vision. So you're going to cast the blurry vision, and with them, you will help focus it in. When you're building the smart scope of work, you're also going to set budgets for yourself. So I don't believe that anybody, including the contractors that you're going to work with, have some sort of formula on exactly what each job costs on a project. I think that what you do is you set ballpark budgets and then you manage to them. And that is what my program is all about, is making sure that I have a budget set for all the jobs that I might have to do on a project, setting a reasonable budget for those things. This budget is going to help me know if the deal is viable. It's going to help me know how much money I need to borrow, or how much of my own money I need to escrow. And it's also going to tell me if, when this contractor gives me a bid, am I off or are they off on the vision of that specific job. Now, this does not mean that you show those budgets to the contractor that you're going to go meet with. This budget is for you internally. Now, I, of course, use the jobs menu to do all of this, which the jobs menu will be linked onto here. So you can use that to build out your scope of work. Now, there's on the spectrum here of detail, there is a program that always comes to my head called Exactament. And this is what a insurance company uses to figure out how much money they're going to give you when you need to do some sort of rehab on your house. So this came in a lot when tornadoes hit out here, and the insurance companies were everywhere, and they would go in, they would do the exactment, how much floors, how much paint, how much damage there was done in the house, and they were very precise, and you could see where the numbers were coming for all of that, and they would send a guy in to go do this exactament, and they would be there all day basically, or at least half of the day. And at the time I was trying to make scopes that were that detailed as well. And I thought how crazy that was, because as a real estate investor, you will be looking at, 10, 20 deals a week if you're really out there trying to buy, because most of them just aren't going to work out. You're going to underwrite them and they're just not going to work out. And so you have to make sure that you aren't wasting all that time on a deal that is just not going to work. You have to have a quick filter. And so instead of this exactament, which, also we won a lot of these projects, and, that's not the way the guys that we go hire, like the all arounders, they don't think like that at all. They think more like, oh, it's probably going to take me 10 guys a week to do this project. And so they figure out what their man days are, and that's how they charge. It's nothing like that. Of course, maybe those numbers come somewhere from there, but it's more of a system of managing to a budget than it is to create the perfect thing that never actually pencils out on paper. So that is what my jobs menu is about, is giving me a quick ballpark figure and then using my skills to manage to those. So now that I have my scope of work ready, I am going to go meet the contractor at the job site. I have printed out the scope of work before I've come, or I have it, on my iPad or whatever, so that we can go through each one of the jobs in their phases and not decide, I'm going to cast my vision to the contractor of both the overall project so they understand, and then the specific chunk of jobs that I'm trying to get them to bid. You see, so you may have a contractor, like a general contractor, who's going to do the whole project. And then you would, of course, cast the whole project plan to them and then go into the next steps here. Or it would be an all-arounder who you're going to give, let's say, 10 of the jobs on the whole scope of work to. And so you would cast the vision for the whole project so they understand what it's going to look like at the end. And then you would show them exactly what you want them to do. Or it may be just the chunk of jobs as one job, like electrical repairs, because you have an electrician there and you're going to meet with that person. Now, of course, if you hired the general contractor, they'll probably bring in the electrician and the plumber and the mechanical, and they'll have all arounders or an internal crew. And so you only have to do it once. Now, we've talked about this in other videos, so I'm only going to hit it quick. Obviously, if you if you want to hire a general contractor, you are going to spend way less bandwidth, but it will cost you more. And maybe that's fine. Depends what level you're at. Done a whole video on what level are you at. Check it out on YouTube. But really, we're talking about MYIing, manage it yourselfing, which means you're working as the project manager, the general contractor, and you're subbing out the different chunks of work. So here we go. Meeting the contractor at the job site. First off, this is against popular opinion, like a lot of the things that I do. I do not believe in getting 3 contractors to bid every job. There are certain cases where you would do that, but I don't believe that as the default. And this is why. I think that where the longevity comes in a real estate organization is building deep relationships with these contractors based on mutual trust. And I think that I think that a big part of building those relationships is not wasting people's time. And just by nature, if you're getting 3 contractors to bid every job, that means that you're always wasting 2 out of the 3 people's time, and they can never get comfortable with you. Now, you don't want people getting too comfortable where they start having price creep, and there are methods that we'll talk about that prevent that. But for most jobs, most projects, I'm not going to have 3 people bid. There are times when change orders come up, and there are jobs with high fear tax that I may get multiple contractors to bid. Or if I feel like I'm getting price creep against me, then I will. But the point is, I would take it one at a time in most cases, because I don't want to waste people's time. I don't want to take anything out of the emotional savings account. That's the relationship capital that you're building with these people, because there are going to be times where I need to make a withdrawal, and I want to save those times. It's like the pick your hill to die on kind of thing. And I always pick the hill of, these were my expectations and you didn't meet them. That's always the hill I'll die on. So I don't get 3 bids, I get 1, and I really focus on that 1, and I really focus on bringing them out there. So here we go. Bringing them out there with my printed scope of work, showing them what I envision for the whole project, and then showing them what I see them doing. And then I walk around the project with them, the job site with them, and I truly let them lead, because, after I've presented my vision, I let them lead, because this is my opportunity to learn from them, especially those of you who don't know construction like I might. You need to let them explain, how this works, what will work, what won't work, and maybe if they have any recommendations. This is a good way for you to start to learn. This is also a good way for you to build trust, because you're trusting the professional. And so you will adjust your scope based on all this. Now, there are things to look out for as you're adjusting the scope. You basically want it to be your idea. If people start talking about how they have to tear everything out and start new, this is a sickness that I call new builderitis, where people don't want to reuse things. They want to just start new, because in construction, it's always easiest to rip everything out and start new. But you can save a lot of time and money by using what is already there. And so if you're catching signs of new builderitis, as we call it, this may be a time where you're not going to get a price that fits for your investment. Okay, so you have walked through the project and adjusted the scope, not your original scope, the scope that you are working with that contractor on, right? Always keep the original, and you will adjust the original maybe based on things that they've said. But first, you want to get an actual bid from this person. So you have adjusted the scope based on the things that you have talked about in that meeting. Now what you're going to do, because we're focused on total alignment, the thing that kills relationship capital the fastest is misalignment, especially unknown misalignment. So I have made this scope of work with them, so we know that we both agree upon these things. But to take that one step further, I will make a video. So I pull out my GoPro and I walk around the project with them, and with the scope in one hand, GoPro in the other, and I encourage them to correct me if I'm wrong, and I let them know what I'm doing. I want to make sure that we see this project exactly the same. So that way there's no misalignment between us, because I believe that that causes the biggest strife in us building trust with each other. And so here we go. And, I'm just walking through the scope of work with them and having them correct me if I see things any differently. Maybe you have to, rediscuss certain points. And then when I'm done, I will ultimately send that video to them, and I will send the written scope of work with the changes that we've made to them, because that is what they're going to be bidding. Okay, so now I have those two things where they're in writing and in video on the things that we agreed upon, and they'll send me a bid. Now, it would be nice if those bids came in more organized fashion, but I'll tell you that a lot of times in this game, it's like a text message at best that you might get, usually even like a phone call. Hey, I'll do that for $10,000. You want to get that in at least a text message. So we're moved on now. We're off the job site. We're at step 3, which is deny or approve the bid. And so you've sent them the scope of work and the video and asked them to bid exactly that. They've given you back a bid, and you want to make sure that you get it at least in text form. There are some companies who actually make formal bids and, email them to you, and they're detailed out. And in my experience, usually those are not the contractors we end up going with, because they have an organization together, which you ultimately pay for. And usually there's marketing that comes behind that. See the video on recruiting subs and what type of subs we go after. And anyway, so most of the time you get verbal and you want to get it in text message. Everybody uses text message. This is a quick side note here that I know a lot of people out there see different software and they want to use that software because it looks cool. And then they try to get all their contractors onto the software or even their internal crew. And it's like the job becomes trying to manage people to use that app instead of manage people to do what matters, which are the things that we're talking about here. And you waste a lot of relationship capital managing people to use this app, as opposed to saving that relationship capital for when you need it, for that hill that you're going to die on, which that hill for me is coming up soon, when I either press on the price of things or when they ask for their paycheck later on and they have not met the expectations that we agreed upon, which is now in writing and in a video. Okay, so that app, well, what I choose to use instead is an app that everybody has, which is iMessages. Or, if you use an Android, like I guess some people do, there's a text app or whatever. So, right, I take out friction, use the app that they already have, which is text messaging. I have them text message me right next to the scope and the video that I've sent them. And now we have that. We usually will screenshot that and we'll put it into our system. So that way, when questions come up about, when they ask for pay, I know what their ultimate bid was, what percentage I'm going to pay there. And if it comes down to it, I have that text message that I can share with them, reminding them of what we agreed to. Couple of notes is that before I approve a bid, I want to make sure that we've discussed. I'm actually rewinding here. I messed up. Sorry. Before I even ask them to give me a bid, in the nature of not wasting people's time, I make sure that they have whatever license, insurance, etc., that I'm going to require from them. So, for us, I cannot hire anybody that doesn't have workers' comp or an exemption or and general liability insurance. Otherwise, my insurance carrier would drop me. There are some people who don't need to worry about those things from that perspective, not saying you shouldn't worry about them for another perspective, like actually having coverage. But if you do need those things, you need to make sure you set that expectation and let them know that, like, hey, I'm not going to be able to approve a bid without these things. And more likely, I'm not going to know about it until I go to like write the first check for you. And, because part of our process is that we collect those things before we write the first check. So I can't really write the check until I have those things. So make sure you set that expectation. Otherwise, there's certainly going to be friction. And then also, if you are requiring them to pull a permit, if it's an electrician or whatever, make sure that they have their license or the ability to pull permits in some way or another. There are guys who don't actually have licenses, but they work with people who do. That's for a different day. Let's say that we get a bid back that is too high, multiple jobs. So ultimately the whole thing is too high. And so there's a few things to do here. First, I want to remember that it is all through the vein of building this relationship capital. Obviously, you're not going to accept a bad bid just in the sake of building relationship capital, because the whole purpose of doing that is to take friction out so you have an organization that can continue to operate. And so I'm going to put it on me if that happens. Hey, I saw your bid and it just doesn't fit the budget that we set for ourselves. And I'm not sure what I messed up here. It's just not the numbers that I came with. Could you help me understand how you came to these numbers? Because I really want to work with you. Or, we've really worked well in the past. I just don't quite understand. And sometimes those things will come down to maybe like one or two specific jobs out of a group that you've given them. And a lot of times just saying those things will get a price adjustment right from the start. Now, you don't want to abuse this because they do actually need to cover their cost and make money. Otherwise, you also don't have any hope of a long-term relationship. But sometimes they're either using a fear tax against you, or sometimes truly you were misaligned on what you expected from a specific job. And so this gives you the chance to align on those things. Now, there are also times that it's just the opposite, that, you had budgeted $10,000 for a job and they came in at 15 grand. That's where you have the conversation we just discussed. Or sometimes they come in at 5 grand. And, maybe you guys understood the vision together perfectly, and they can just do it for way cheaper than you expected, which that absolutely does happen. But in most cases, what it is they didn't understand what you wanted done, and they're about to do half of what you wanted done, and that will be a problem. That'll be a problem, especially because, let's just use the $10,000, $5,000 example. So you thought it was going to cost $10,000. They bid it at $5,000 because they're only planning on doing half of the work. And you'll find out about that, at the end of whatever sub chunk that pay period. And then, the second half of the work isn't going to cost $5,000 anymore because you've just taken out all the efficiency of that job. So now it's going to cost you more because of that mistake. So you might think you're getting a fast one, but really you're just going to shoot yourself in the foot. So now there is a way to go about this, because you really don't want to tip them off that, hey, gosh, I thought this would cost double and you're giving me a way better bid. So, don't say that, because maybe truly you just thought it was going to take more work. And, if you do that the wrong way, you'll just be asking for a higher bid the next time. And so just, ask questions about it. Just, hey, I want to make sure that we're aligned on this one. It's a confusing job. And gosh, I'm not even sure I did my notes correctly. And so just making sure I understand how you see the completion of this job, and then update your scope of work based on that. Cool. So denial of the bid is first try to work out the prices on things, see if there's room there, or maybe it doesn't work and you let them down easy. Hey, this bid isn't going to work for me. I'm going to have to go back to the field and try to find somebody who can work this in on a budget that works for me. I really liked you guys and what you have to offer, and I really hate wasting people's time. Truly, it's like the last thing that I want to do. And so I know you came out here and did the bid, and yeah, I'm sorry it doesn't work out. There's even some times where I might send a guy a check for the time, because it takes a lot of time to write these bids, and if they actually took the time to do it, because it might come down the road that they do work out for you. And so I don't want to burn that bridge. And a lot of times when you get high bids, it's just a supply and demand thing. Maybe they have a lot of work on their plate right now, and so they've given you a bid that's more like, well, I don't really need the work. I would do it at this price. And that's okay. Don't get mad about that. That happens. You can't really expect anything different, because wouldn't you do the same thing? Now, if you've already built a relationship with them and then they start price creeping, that is a little bit different. Also human nature. Okay, so that's one reason why you might have gotten a high bid. Another reason you might have gotten a high bid is because you haven't taken other steps that we've talked about to make a project look more appealing, which is, we haven't talked about it in this video. Sorry, we've talked about it in other content. But basically, if you detail out every job and give the contractor a list of 100 jobs, that just looks more complex. So what I try to do is group things up into, like as many tasks as I can group up into one job. And then, I fill out the details to make sure all the things that I need done are getting done. But the actual line item of a job I keep as less. That's why you'll see in the jobs menu, there's only 100 jobs in the jobs menu. There could be much more, but instead I fill those out in the details specific to each project. Because when you give a big list, it seems complex and you get a complex price. Whereas when you give less, it just seems like an easier, well put together project. So that's one. Another thing is a clean job site. If a job site is messy, it gives you a messy price. And you need to make sure that if it's a brand new project and it was a hoarder's house, as an extreme example, clean that thing out first. That way they can see everything that they need to bid on. You can see everything that you need to scope out. And it just is a much more inviting job site for a much more inviting price. Another reason that you might get a high bid is that you suck and you need to improve. And what do I mean by that? Contractors have dealt with, well, there's two different things, I guess. They've dealt with the mistrust for a long time. So everybody gets it. Contractors don't really trust customers. Customers don't trust contractors. And, some people come at them with that right from the start. And people can see it from a mile away. Therefore, you get the price that is like, I don't really want to work with this person, but if I get this price, I would deal with the micromanagement that I'm about to face. And the other, I guess the other one is just the hyper micromanager. It's really obvious that person's going to be a micromanager, or it's really obvious that that person's going to be a mind changer. So, mind changers are out there where they think they want this thing, then they change their mind and they want this other thing, and then they can't quite understand, well, why did the project take way longer and end up costing more than we had talked about? And then they blame it on the contractor. This kind of like fuels the whole contractor customer thing. And so, like, the point is that contractors are sensitive to those kind of things. And if they can smell that on you, you are going to get a higher price. So work on yourself a little bit there to make sure you're presenting yourself appropriately. Okay. Now, that's denial. Here's approval. Get it in writing, like we talked about. Text message. Use an app that they use, which is text message. If they have email, great, even better, easier for you to handle. And don't accept verbal. Make sure it's, even if they have given it verbally, then just send them a text afterwards. Hey, just making sure we talked about this scope, send them that scope and this price. I just want to have this here just so we both remember down the road. Cool. Got that? Then collect the required licenses, insurance, permits, and all of that you had discussed that you would need. And then you make sure that you have agreed upon and written checkpoints or pay schedules. So at what points in their chunk of work will you be paying them and how much? So let's just say that you subbed to them a chunk of work that is 10 jobs long. They'll get the first 3 done, and then you'll pay them what amount? What does that checkpoint look like? Obviously, for us, the checkpoints we generally use are phases, the phase, block, and job system. But we do sub-chunking, as we call it, chunk jobs into different groupings based on, what works best for the project. That is for a whole different time. And there's lots of strategy that goes into that on how to improve your pricing and your time and so on and so forth, how to get the right contractors for the right chunks of work. But the point of this is you need to know what the expectations for pay is. And this is a good time to say this. Never, ever, ever pay in advance. Never a good time to do that. Now, I'm all about building relationship capital. This is one thing that I will not do. There's never a good time for it. So there are, in the sake of building relationship capital, there are things you can do to make this easier for the contractor. Like you can pay the money for the materials. That's the right thing to do if the contractor wants you to. You can have more checkpoints for the contractor. I mean, it could be every other day. I mean, of course, this is a decision you need to make if you actually want that burden of having to do an inspection and hold accountability every other day to, an expectation, because that will definitely wear on you and your relationship capital. But never pay the money in advance. Now that we have an approved bid, it is time for them to start their work. And eventually they're going to come to one of those predefined pay schedules, and they will call and ask for a check. And I believe that it is your responsibility to get there quickly so you can write them a check quickly. These guys work to put food on their plates, on their guys' plates, on their families' plates. And if you mess around here, you will eat up that relationship capital so fast. And you just got to remember that, they're asking for a $2,000 pay point, and that might not seem like a lot to you, but to them it is a lot. And it's also, it's more than that, that there certainly is the contractor customer trust thing. And they have been burnt by people before as well. And so don't give them any amount of friction to start thinking that you're another one of those. And so if they've said they're done, make it a point to get out there very quickly, tell them what your expectation for yourself is, and then make it happen. Now, there are some issues that if you're an out of town investor, or if you're an in town investor but you're busy with other things, on how you get this inspected quickly. And here are some methods that I use. One is that I might hire a third party person to go do the inspections. And that really is easy and clean, because it's like the car salesman thing where they always have like the third party, they're the good guy and the bad guy's the manager in the other room. Well, now if you have this third party, it's always like, well, third party said that this, and this wasn't done. I just gave them the pay schedule. These guys are really tough. And so that's a good method, but that's obviously going to cost you. This is almost built in if you have a hard money lender or a bank loan, because they'll send out people to go look at these things. But that's, of course, for your money from the bank, which might be in longer checkpoints than it is with your contractor. Okay, so one way is the third party. So either an inspector from the bank, that the bank hires or whatever, or somebody that you go out and get. So there are people who would do this. You ought to find them. Two is city inspections. So this is especially useful for like an electrician or a plumber. Obviously, they're going to have a rough inspection and a trim out inspection. And this is great because, like, a lot of you guys aren't going to know electrical, plumbing, and HVAC and all the details on what to look for. That's a lifetime of learning there. But the inspectors will, and truly, if it's good enough for the city, it's going to be good enough for you, especially in those things. There are other things that require city inspections and some things that don't. If you go through the jobs menu, which is linked here, you will, I have videos on each one of the items that have the, that a city inspection would be sufficient for. Now, the third way to do this would be a inspection from the contractor you've hired themselves. So this would be like photo and video from them. Now, it's really easy to miss things on these, or to make a video or show pictures that only show the finished things. I've been caught plenty of times by this. And so the way that I handle this situation is I have a specific template of a walkthrough. And this is something that you would set expectations for before you started with the pay schedules. But basically, just if we're going to do it that way, because it's going to help speed up the pay for you, I'm going to actually have you do the inspection. So that way I don't have to wait for the third party to come out, which I could. It just usually takes a week. And so here is how my lender wants the inspections. And that is this walkthrough video. So every time that you do a draw, just do this walkthrough, show behind the doors, you show in the closet. I need you to just shoot down into the crawl space. And, that's what we have to have for every time we release payment. And that way you've kind of controlled the hidden areas, and make sure that whatever your template is shows all of the areas inside cabinets and so on and so forth. And also, then there will be maybe job specific photos and videos you want. Okay. During a project, you're bound to run into change orders. Somebody opens up a wall, they find whatever they may have found, or the job was bigger than they expected. And there are certain times where you are going to have to say, well, maybe the job is taking you longer than you had expected, but that's not really my problem. The scope hasn't changed. And there are times where you may just go ahead and do the change order, even though you think it might not be right for the sake of your relationship capital. You don't have to be, you have to make the choice there. Or is it, what's the right thing to do is really what that comes down to. Now for the opened up the wall, obviously a different scope. You can't expect them to do this work at the original price. So what do you do there? Well, first have them bid what the extra work is, detail and bid what the extra work is. And if it's reasonable, I would just approve it and move on. If it's not, and you feel like it's taking advantage of a situation, which a note here, there are good contractors out there. There's plenty of them. We've talked a lot about how to find the right ones, not in this video and others, but there are also ones that aren't. And what they'll do is, really their initial bid to you will be just a loss leader, which means, they're not going to make a lot of money on the initial bid. They're trying to do it just to get their foot in the door. And the way they make their money is by finding all kinds of things in the walls and giving super high fear taxed bids to fix those things because they're already in there. And it's just easy to keep hiring them to do it. So if you feel like you're in a situation like that, this is the time that you'll have other contractors come in. And, similar dialogue here to, other methods that I don't go blaming people. I would say something along the lines of, gosh, I have an investor on this one, and I feel like since this came up outside of scope, I really need to do my due diligence here. Otherwise I'd be doing them wrong, and I don't want to do them wrong. And so I know this crew that does this specific thing for, I don't know how they do it for so awfully cheap, but I'm going to have them and maybe another guy that I know come look at this. I hope that doesn't offend you, but just if I didn't do this due diligence, I would feel like I was really doing wrong by the investor. And there you go. That's the time to do it. And hopefully you preserve some bandwidth there. And, also the contractors that you're going to have go bid it, let them know what situation they're in. For us personally, this is actually where I send in the internal crew to go take care of these types of problems. Also another way to keep things in check. If I feel like there's price creep, I'll send the internal crew in, which for you might be the handyman, just to do the thing, just to keep prices from getting out of order. Okay, that's a change order. Another thing you might run into is what we call the contractor's black hole, where, the guy's not showing up to the job site anymore. It's harder to get a hold of. You can't get him to, there's no like stickiness to anything that's going on. That is the black hole. And that happens quite often. Usually it happens because, these contractors don't trust you to have the next job lined up. So they've already lined up their next job, and, they're kind of like working on both of them at the same time, but there's more money in that one. So especially if you let them get ahead of you on the money, that just puts you ready for getting in the contractor's black hole. But then you also have like specific job contractors who their whole business is moving from one job to the next to the next. So they're always thinking about the next job that they have to do. And, if they're going to go to where the money's at. And so anyway, how do you deal with things once you've fallen into the contractor's black hole? You set an expectation and you and be reasonable about it. Because when you're in the contractor's black hole, it's really easy to get ticked off and frustrated, and then handle your stuff through bad emotions instead of handling it through fairness and being rational. And so what I would do is say, hey, Mr. Black Hole Contractor, in a text message, I have tried to get a hold of you on this date, and this date, which are facts. And I haven't gotten a response from you. And you, to my knowledge, have not been to the job site since, whatever date, which is fact. And I just can't go on that way. And so I really need to get this job pushed along. So my expectation is that the X, Y, and Z will be done by this date, let's say 2 weeks in the future, a date that is reasonable to complete that work, even more reasonable than it should be. So let's say if it's like a flooring job, like I know a flooring job would only take a couple days if you were really focused on it, but I'm going to give them a week because, I want to be reasonable in fairness to them. If back to Mr. Contractor, if it is not done by that date, I'm going to have to let you off the job and we will settle up on pay, which I would settle up fair on pay. But, there is the fact that I need to go hire somebody else out. So really, I would be, whatever it costs me, I'm going to take out of the money I owed them. And so anyway, that is how you handle the black hole contractor. Be reasonable about the expectation, only state facts. And if they don't hold up to the ultimatum you've set, do what you got to do. Now, finally, contractor asks for payment and it is not what you had agreed upon in scope and in pay schedule. And this is the hill you die on. If you have done everything that you know to set the expectation clearly, and you have done everything that you can, all the things that we've talked about, to be in alignment, and they give you a project that is not what you had talked about, hold your ground. I'm sorry, I hate doing this, but I'm not paying one red cent until it is done like we agreed upon. I really want to have a future working with you, but I cannot pay you without that being done. Now, you can use the same tactics as before. I just don't feel that I'm doing right by the investors on this project if I pay you before these things are done. I mean, this is what we talked about. This is in the video. And gosh, I wouldn't be doing my job if I went and paid for that. And you might have to do that 5 or 6 times before you get what you want. But once again, this is your time to hold your ground. All right, some final tips here. I don't believe in bonuses. Some people try to give bonuses to get a job done on time or whatever. I think once you do that, you've basically started a trend that now if there's no bonus on the table, there's going to be problems. And I think the bonus is treating people well, having next jobs lined up for them, and being a fair and reasonable person to work with. That will make people want to work with you more than trying to, give tips. 2, if you're working with a new contractor and haven't built the trust yet, or even if it is somebody that you've built trust with, micromanaging takes away trust and relationship capital quickly. So sometimes I will micromanage without micromanaging, which means that I show up to a job site because I'm checking on another job there, or I'm grabbing something for the investor on this project, and just so I can see to make sure that we're actually as aligned as I thought we might be aligned. Now, if I see something there, I certainly will not say something to the person's crew. I will take a note to say something later to them. Micromanaging will get you the answer you want, but maybe not the result you want. And maybe micromanaging is not the right word to use here. I get to see both sides of it because we also work with customers. I used to work with a lot more customers than I work with now, but where, it's like, how long do you think that job's going to take? Oh, probably a couple weeks. Well, do you think you can make it take 10 days and, blah, 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 blah. Well, no, I can't. Well, gosh, if you could just make, and it keeps going back and forth. Could you just please? And it's like, well, I said 2 weeks because it's probably going to take 2 weeks. Like I can tell you 10 days if that's what you want to hear, but that's not the result you're going to get. But most contractors aren't as candid, and they'll just, they'll bend to that thing, or they'll bend to like a certain price, but they can't actually get it done for that. And so you've just, you've put yourself in a bad situation. That's all. You only think you're getting what you want out of it. Uh, I try to avoid having multiple contractors work on the same job site at the same time. For some weird reason, it causes fighting between the two sometimes. But what it does mostly for me is it gives everybody another body to point a finger at. So when something goes wrong, it's always, oh, well, that's because blah, blah, blah came in there and did whatever. And now just uh, everything is hard to hold accountability to. Everything's like kind of slippery. And so I try to just keep one at a time. And, like most of these methods, as you've heard here, it's like, it inhibits speed on a project. And you're right. I definitely always prioritize doing things right, getting good pricing, having all the chips in front of me at all times, than being fast. And so a project might take a couple more months or whatever it might be, but just get a better deal on the front end and you solve all those problems. Keep a job site clean. A a cluttered job site will decrease efficiency on the project. It will also make you get higher bids on the project. Also, if it's messy, it just if a few Gatorade bottles are left on a job site, all of a sudden there's more because people think that's okay to do. And then it just grows into a problem that actually starts costing you direct money instead of only indirect money. Just want to say before we close up shop here, check out that jobs menu. Really, that's like the heart and soul of all of our stuff here. And two is that you need to learn the skills necessary to manage these guys with a gentle touch that helps you build this relationship capital, because that is what makes you be able to use less bandwidth and grow a real organization. But you need to know when it's time to use the hammer, and don't be afraid to do so. Hard conversations are part of this business. Do not be afraid to have them. And thank you very much.